Here on the planet Cell, magic behaves a bit differently from other places I've visited in the Cosmere. During my studies, I've heard a lot about the many powerful and versatile magic systems found on this planet, but I've never actually seen them in action. I've especially heard about the Elantrians, but I've never seen them at full power. The many magic systems of Cell are location dependent. This is largely due to their shared history and the similar methods of drawing power, and the shared source of investiture, which is the door.
Because the cognitive realm has distinct locations, unlike the spiritual realm where most forms of investiture reside, magic on Cell is very dependent upon physical position. In addition, the rules of perception and intent are greatly magnified on Cell, to the point that language or similar functions directly shapes the magic as it's pulled from the cognitive realm and put to use. This overlap between language, location, and magic on the planet has become so integral to the system that subtle changes in one can have profound effects on how the door is accessed. Indeed, I believe that the very landscape itself has become invested, to the point that it is a growing self-awareness, in a way unseen on other planets in the Cosmere. I do not know how this happened or what the ramifications will be. Cell is also a larger planet than most inhabited worlds of the Cosmere. The vastness and the fact that the magic is location-based has led to the creation of many magic systems, all working from the same source of power and accessing it by similar means. In this video, I'll mostly be talking about AonDor, Forgery, and a little bit of Dakhor. I will mostly ignore Chayshan, Bloodsealing, and Swordish potions. This video will be sourcing information from these books: Elantris, The Emperor's Soul, Arcanum Unbounded, Secret History, The Lost Metal, and Tress of the Emerald Sea.
I'll be avoiding story spoilers in this video, but where I can't, I will provide a timestamp for where to skip to.
Long ago, in prehistoric antiquity, the shards Devotion and Dominion were both killed and splintered by Odium. Odium, who was still figuring out the whole shardic murder thing, basically took the corpses of these two gods and shoved their power into the cognitive realm instead of leaving their power splintered in the spiritual realm. This action had a couple of fascinating consequences.
Firstly, it made interplanetary travel through the cognitive realm incredibly dangerous. That's one of the reasons I haven't visited here before. It's extremely expensive. I had to charter a ship to get here in the physical realm.
The subastral of Cell is so dangerous because the corpses of the gods Devotion and Dominion manifest there as the door, a highly volatile and powerful source of investiture that exists in the cognitive realm as a plasma-like substance.
What were you asking?
This door. Is it gaseous investiture, or is it something else completely?
Oh, that's a great question. People have not been asking enough about the door.
And if it is gaseous, or not gaseous, is it plasma?
You got it.
Okay.
It is super, not plasma, it's super, it's super dense to the point that it's liquefied. Does that make sense? So it's plasma, basically. It's its own weird thing. Yeah. So what you can write is it's its own weird thing that's kind of plasma-like.
Basically, if you were to walk to Cell through the cognitive realm, from say the expanse of the densities, you would eventually run into an impassable wall of plasma that's just ready to rip you to shreds. Secondly, it made it so all invested arts on Cell are highly location dependent. The door is what powers all magic on Cell. Everything from AonDor to Bloodsealing to Dakhor to Soul Forgery are all powered by this pressurized reservoir of power in the cognitive realm.
He began to grasp the theory of AonDor. The door was as Galadon had described it, a powerful reservoir just beyond the normal senses. Its only desire was to escape. The books explain that the door existed in a place that was full of pressure, and so the energy pushed its way through any viable exit, moving from an area of high concentration to one of low. However, because of the door's nature, it could enter the physical world only through gates of the proper size and shape. Elantrians could create rifts with their drawings, providing a means for the door to escape, and those drawings would determine what form the energy took when it appeared. However, if even one line was of the wrong proportion, the door would be unable to enter, like a square trying to force its way through a round hole. Some theorists describe the process using unfamiliar words like frequency and pulse length. Raoden was only beginning to understand how much scientific genius was held in the library's musty pages.
Investiture flows freely on Cell, if you have the prerequisites and knowledge to access it.
Having all of these powers exist in the realm of thoughts and perceptions has led to some of the most fascinating attributes of Cellish magic. Magic on Cell is accessed through three criteria: location, form, and initiation.
Magics on Cell are highly location dependent. Because of this, the further away a practitioner is from their homeland, the weaker the magic becomes. This is especially evident in AonDor, but also seems to be true in Soul Forgery. The further away a practitioner is from my palm, the weaker the soul stamp is. This is likely because the door exists in the cognitive realm, a place with specific locations.
Geographic region and ethnicity are also key prerequisites for using Cellish magic. For example, the Sheod, the process that turns a normal person into an Elantrian, only takes people from Erelon, Teod, and Duladel. All three of these countries are ethnically Aonic, meaning that they can trace their heritage back to the land of Erelon. In a similar fashion, only the Fjordell are able to use Dakhor, once certain prerequisites are met.
However, there are examples of people being adopted in the Cosmere into specific ethnic groups and then getting access to that magic. We've seen this in Tress of the Emerald Sea and the Sunlit Man. This form of genetic-based access to magic seems to apply to all magics on Cell, including Chayshan, Dakhor, and, of course, AonDor. Anyone is able to practice Chayshan for the exercise benefits, but one has to be of Jindo heritage to get any magical abilities from it.
On Cell, magic is shaped, directed, and released through physical shapes and runes. This is seen most potently with Elantrians, but also forgery. Shapes made by individuals with the proper intent and initiations are able to unlock and shape the power of the door. An Elantrian is able to create aeons, logographic runes that represent concepts. Not only do these runes represent words or objects, but they also have a visual similarity to the landscape in which they were conceived.
As I mentioned earlier, I'm on Cell. I just came from the Rose Empire and I'm working my way through the mountains to Teod. In my palm, I purchased a soul stamp from a master forger for a ridiculous amount of aluminum. Like, you don't even want to know how much this cost me. It was insane. But what this soul stamp does, if I can do this properly, is it rewrites my soul. So I was adopted into the group of Elantrians by my friend Adosha. This soul stamp, if it takes, will give me the ability to write aeons. Every aeon starts with the same symbol, Aon, which is creatively named, I know. And it looks like this. It starts with this line, which represents the coastline of the country of Erelon, this line, which represents the Atad Mountains, and a center dot, which represents Lake Alanoe. From these starting lines, dozens, if not hundreds of aeons can be created. All of these aeons can also be changed and made more specific in what they do with modifiers and additional aeons to create aeon equations.
The potential of AonDor is nearly limitless. Using the correct modifiers and combination of aeons, a knowledgeable practitioner of AonDor can do just about anything.
Could you use AonDor to manipulate Big C connection? And if so, would a real AonDor smarty be able to do something similar to a bondsmith?
Okay, so the short answer to your questions is yes. Let me give some explanations. So even when you're seeing some things happen in Elantris itself, you are seeing them manipulate connection, right? It is mostly reinforcing connection, but it is in a way manipulation. Rewriting connection, rewriting identity are both things that they can do. And so with enough power, with enough smartiness, what a bondsmith can do can be done. In fact, we have seen short-range else calling done by them. Obviously, else calling's not a bondsmith thing, but you know that a bondsmith powered a big else calling. Like one of the big things you've seen a bondsmith do is, as I said, get people between planets, and you have seen people use AonDor to else call. You've seen them lightweave. You've seen them do a lot of these things. They also could do some of this same stuff. Basically, rule of thumb is almost anything in the Cosmere that is possible can be replicated with AonDor with the right program. But you may need an injection of investiture in certain ways. Okay?
Thank you.
Yep.
There are some wild things that can be done with AonDor. An Elantrian with the right aeonic equation can basically program an object into existence out of nothing. It's almost like they're on a Minecraft server and have op, but instead of typing in /give and getting the item, they can open up the console and program that item into existence.
Elantrians are also able to craft curses. In the next section, there will be specific spoilers for Tress of the Emerald Sea, so if you haven't read that book, skip to this timestamp here.
In Tress of the Emerald Sea, the sorceress is known for her curses. These curses are complex Aeon equations created by the Elantrian Ryaina that require a specific set of criteria to be met in order for the curse to be broken. In the book, we see personalities change, individuals transformed into different animals, and limit the way that people are able to speak. Seemingly, this is only the tip of the iceberg for curses that can be crafted by an Elantrian. Elantrians are also able to affect connection in ways similar to bondsmiths. They can create illusions like lightweavers, heal physical wounds like edge dancers, and change stones into food like a soulcaster. They can even teleport or use the surge of transportation like an Elscaller.
AonDor is the most dramatic use of investiture on Cell, but it's certainly not the only one. Forgery acts under the same principle of using language and symbols to dictate how the door is manifest, but instead of starting with the symbol that represents the place, it ends with it.
Forgery is an invested art that rewrites the soul of a person or an object. These changes make a person or object's past change how it manifests in the physical realm. It's kind of like soul casting in a way, but has far more potential for the changes that can be made to an object. Like hemalurgy, forgery can change the spirit web of an individual, but instead of grafting on an addition to someone's soul with a stolen attribute, the connection, history, and experiences of that individual are rewritten.
If these changes take, it rewrites the spirit web of that individual or object. When applied to a person, this can change someone's entire history, making them a soldier or a linguist or a scholar for that matter.
A forger is able to engrave instructions into an object, usually a stamp or a stone, that rewrites the history of a person or an object. If a change is too drastic or implausible, the object will reject the change the forger is attempting to make.
Soul Forgery could be used to turn someone into an Allomancer, to break the Not-El bond between a Radiant and a Spren, and as we've seen in this video, turn someone into an Elantrian. However, these larger changes are less likely to take, and some prerequisites have to be met. To turn someone into an Allomancer, for example, they would have had to have been from Scadrial. Also, the more fantastical effects of Soul Forgery require more investiture than a soul stamp usually has. It's also about convincing the soul that these changes are plausible with very detailed and specific instructions. And if the changes are too drastic, the soul stamp just won't take. And as I mentioned before, these dramatic changes usually require more investiture than a normal soul stamp has access to.
I'm wondering if Shai could create a stamp that would turn someone into an Allomancer, or alternatively, create a stamp that would break a bond between a Radiant and their Spren. That is possible, but likely beyond Shai's ability. It would require large amounts of investiture. The second would be easier.
Not only do you need to have the right heritage as well as the knowledge and intent to use an invested art, but you have to be initiated into the group whose invested art that you're trying to use.
Elantrians must undergo the Sheod to be changed into their new form. As mentioned before, you can be invited into the group, but there also seems to be a limited amount of available slots for Elantrians.
Okay, so why don't basically the gods in Elantris take over the entire planet? There are a couple of reasons for this. One is that magic and on Cell is very strongly tied to location, and was even back when the Elantrians were at the height of their power. Okay, so this is a big part of it. Location-based magic, meaning with further you get from Elantris, the less powerful your magic was, and the Elantrians really didn't like going places where they were not super powerful. And so this is certainly part of it. And I explored this idea in Warbreaker, where the people who happen to be gods are really aggressive and kind of slowly conquering outward and things like that. So it felt right for me in Elantris to be doing it that way. The numbers would increase over time. The number of Elantrians had certain thresholds and upper limits that I haven't described in the books yet.
For Dakhor, specific sacrifices and incantations must be done to and performed by the initiate into the monastery before they're able to begin the process of bone growth. Forgers undergo extensive training. Although this is not explicitly stated in text as a form of initiation, I think it counts.
Brandon has tried to balance the way that these N-positive magic systems work by making them location-dependent. Like an Elantrian just left to their own devices is incredibly powerful, but AonDor only works in Elantris. However, we have recently seen that there are ways around this limitation.
The Irie, an organization of world-hopping Elantrians, are able to use AonDor off-world by having a conduit of sorts pipe the door into the structures they build in the cognitive realm.
This visual is particularly funny to me because it's like the Irie have to place down fiber optic cables wherever they go in the cognitive realm just to use their magic. And like, what if they didn't turn off the pipe from the door to their base in the Scadrian subastral? And that's just how the Ghost Bloods are able to access Purified Door, by like turning on a faucet or something. That'd be funny. I don't think that's how it is, but it is a funny visual.
Aeons can also be modified to reflect the landscape of other places. We see this in the Lost Metal when Shai uses a soul stamp with invested ink on herself and a whole vat of Purified Door to become an Elantrian. However, for Aeons to function, they also need a source of power. Just because an Aeon has the right shape to fit its new location doesn't mean it has access to the door off-world. It's not like Allomancy in this regard, where it pulls Preservation's investiture directly from the spiritual realm and as such works everywhere. Another source of investiture, or Purified Door, is required for these modified Aeons to function.
And that's just about it. It looks like Cell is going to be more important in the Cosmere moving forward as things become more interconnected and interplanetary politics come into play. As we've already seen with Sion showing up in Rhythm of War and Ghost Bloods using Purified Door, Cell has a lot of valuable magics and resources to offer the wider Cosmere. It's just a matter of getting them off-world. Did you enjoy this video? If you did, please like and subscribe if you enjoy Cosmere content. And how important do you think Cell is going to be in the future? We know that Brandon's going to be writing like 3 Elantris sequels in between the Mistborn sequels coming up in the next decade or so. So there's going to be a lot. Did you learn anything new in this video? Comment down below what you learned or if I got anything wrong. And as always, thank you so much for watching and have an excellent time of day. And I shall continue to Teode. Okay guys, bye. Yeah, let me do that. Loose there and Telescope will rip me to pieces if I say that wrong.